For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and you're watching our weekly flagship show, The Talking Point. Glad to welcome from Singapore Dr. Greg Austin. He's a senior fellow Cyberspace and Future Conflicts at IISS and the author of a report that we're going to be discussing. Professor Austin, thank you so much for your time. I do know that you have a flight to catch, hence we're doing this, recording this show and premiering it, not doing it live, but thanks for your time.
Thank you, Amitabh.
Also from the capital, Kazim Rizvi, a public policy entrepreneur. He's the founding director of The Dialogue, as well as a founding partner of DeepStrat. Kazim, glad to see you on StratNews.
Thank you, Amitabh. Pleasure.
Before I get to both of you on the IISS report, and I also want to look at the UN ITU, the International Telecommunications Union ranking report that came out. I just want to play out what India's Foreign Secretary Harsh Vardhan Shringla said in an open debate at the United Nations Security Council on the 29th on the issue of cybersecurity.
Some states are leveraging their expertise in cyberspace to achieve their political and security-related objectives and indulge in contemporary forms of cross-border terrorism. The world is already witnessing the use of cyber tools to compromise state security through inter alia attacking critical national infrastructure, including health and energy facilities, sometimes even disrupting social harmony through radicalization. Open societies have been particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns.
Professor Austin, just looking at your report, which was released earlier this week, you've separated it into 15 countries into 3 tiers. India is in the third, but you're pointing out, as the lead author, and the report is pointing out that it's not because India is not capable or doesn't have the potential of being in a higher tier. It's because of the government.
Well, that's the sort of background conclusion, I suppose. So as countries try and organize their national cyber capabilities, there are several actors who are central to all of that. In broad terms, the private sector, the government, and other knowledge specialists, especially universities. And in the case of India, I think it's fair to say, and it's not just our opinion, it's really based on the advice and information of Indian specialists, that the government has not been as active as some other governments have been elsewhere. And for what we see is that the private sector in India is far more active in cybersecurity through organizations like the Data Security Council of India than, so the private sector is more active than the government, that's for sure.
Kazim, India has a lot of catching up to do, but we have made a lot of strides as well in the area of cybersecurity.
No, absolutely, Amitabh. In fact, if you see that it was only in 2013 that we started putting emphasis on cybersecurity, and we came up with the first cybersecurity policy. And after that, there has been tremendous amount of work where the government, the defense forces, the intelligence have been working towards creating doctrines for effective defensive and offensive capabilities in the cyberspace. In 2017, we had a first joint doctrine, which was released by the Army, which recognized cyber warfare as a prominent sort of space of warfare, equating it with land, air, and water, right? And it also sort of spoke about the need to have a cyber defense agency, which was eventually developed in 2019. Also, the fact that the land warfare doctrine, which was published by the Indian Army in 2018, again subsumed within information warfare, cyberspace was designated as a new dimension of warfare and an important factor in winning future battles. So, of course, you're looking at in the last few years that the government is looking at cybersecurity, defending the cyberspace with a lot more interest, with a lot more rigor, and with a lot more effectiveness as well. And I think we are also working on a new cybersecurity strategy, which hopefully will come out very soon. last year at the Independence Day speech, the Prime Minister spoke about cybersecurity. He spoke about and put one paragraph around cybersecurity. So definitely it's coming from the top. And India is working towards creating effective doctrines to defend our cyberspace. And we're also seeing, and Professor Austin's report also mentioned that we are pivoting also towards adversaries which are putting us in greater threats, with which India has greater threat perception against. So India is sort of reacting to the situation. Of course, we have a lot more to catch up with, but we are not static. We are dynamic. We are sort of moving forward. But yes, there is a lot more to be done, and happy to discuss that further in the discussion.
Sure. Professor Austin, like Kazim pointed out there, your report also looks at how India had a lot of focus on our Western neighbor, Pakistan, in terms of cyber capabilities and how we were offensively or defensively working with them. But you have recognized also through the evidence that you've seen that there's been a shift towards China, as he's pointing out, right?
Yeah, indeed. Well, perhaps it's best to say that we assume that that shift is taking place. So it's one of India's, to India's credit, that there's very little information in the public domain about its intelligence and security agencies. We know far more about what's happening in China in terms of their cybersecurity planning and policy in the government, the secret government agencies, than we do about India. But we've assumed, based on what we know, what we can see, that shift would be taking place. But the information, the hard information, is just simply not there.
Kazim, in terms of what we have to deal with now, again, I beg your pardon, reports about drones over the High Commission in Islamabad, apart from what we've been seeing in the Jammu area as well, cyber attacks on, key infrastructure, power, banking, finance, all key issues. What are India's concerns and how prepared are we to deal with them?
So I think we need to look at the new age, the rise of technology in the software and the hardware domain, and that is leading to the rise of new age warfare, where you have your critical infrastructure like your ports, your railways, your nuclear power plants, right, which are now requiring strong cyber defense mechanism. Then you have your borders, right? And you spoke about the drone attacks, and we'll get there later, which need strong defense mechanism as well. And then you have your communication services, your people interacting with each other through different communication devices, the rise of internet in banking, in payments, technology, everywhere, where internet is connecting people at every level. And you have e-commerce activities taking place, people doing business online, people communicating online. So because the world is going online, and with a post-COVID recovery, we have seen that more and more people are using online tools. I mean, we are doing this discussion online, right? So definitely it's critical for India to secure its cyberspace, and it's doing that. And I think what we are also seeing is escalation, not in the terms of the rise of sort of greater attacks, but obviously India has been under attack. India has also countered it, but we're also seeing in sort of development and deployment of new age technologies, right? The drone attack is a critical example of this. And if I may sort of use an anecdote and use an example of a movie in 2005, The Batman Begins by Christopher Nolan. In the end, there was a scene where Batman and Gordon are talking about escalation, and they sort of spoke of defending Gotham with sort of rise of escalation weapons. You have semi-automatics. They are using semi-automatics, but the adversaries are using automatics, and they are using Kevlar, and then the adversary are using armored piercing rounds. The same is happening, right? I mean, you're looking at the drone attack. Today morning, we saw that there was a drone which was spotted in Indian embassy in Islamabad. What does it tell us? We need to react faster. We need a counter drone policy, a counter drone mechanism, where we are able to sort of understand through these counter drone measures, how these payloads are coming in our territory. I think India is also going to acquire latest anti-drone technologies, right? Because a lot of non-state actors are using new age technologies to attack and to also sort of create challenges for us. And this was actually stated by the Foreign Secretary in his speech. Yeah. I mean, he alluded to the use of new age technologies in the cyberspace by non-state and state actors. And and you're seeing this taking place on ground. So we are now understanding that we have to keep up with the reality. And where do we go from there? We need effective strategy deployment. We need a cybersecurity policy. We need strong standards of protecting our own cyberspace. End-to-end encryption is a critical aspect towards that when it comes to payments, when it comes to communication services. And Foreign Secretary also spoke of the fact that our ICT networks, it should be secured. We should not have any backdoors, right? So preventing backdoors, not introducing any backdoors as well is critical. And also privacy. And happy to discuss a little more on the intersection of privacy and security. But moreover, threat intelligence sharing with like-minded countries like US, UK. We already have a great cyber diplomacy program with the EU and the US and the UK, but we need to do more when it comes to data sharing for law enforcement purposes. We need to move beyond an MLAT agreement to a bilateral agreement where we sort of share data when it comes to law enforcement, so that the law enforcement can do its job much faster when it comes to carrying out investigation.
Sure, the IISS report does point out that India gets a lot of works with a lot of other countries. But before I go to that, since you mentioned the Foreign Secretary, let me just play out that soundbite that you were talking about, where he talks about non-state and state actors and ICT and backdoors.
Security of ICT products, which form the building blocks of cyberspace, are being compromised. There are widespread concerns that state and non-state actors are introducing vulnerabilities and harmful hidden functions, including through backdoor channels, into ICT networks and products. Such nefarious acts undermine trust and confidence in global ICT supply chains, compromise security, and create potential flashpoints between states. It is in the interest of the international community to ensure that all actors abide by their international obligations and commitments, and not indulge in practices that could have potentially disruptive effects on global supply chains and trade in ICT products.
Professor Austin, this tier 2 and tier 1, how much is the gap there? How large is it? And how difficult is it to move up?
Well, thanks for the question. We basically say that the tier 1 of cyber power is for countries that have world-leading strengths in the 7 categories we look at. So it's really about world-leading strengths. And what we found is that the United States is the only country that had world-leading strengths in the 7 categories of cyber power we looked at. I won't go through them all, but one of them, of course, was the digital economy. Another one was core cyber intelligence capability. And another one was demonstrated offensive cyber operations. And in those 3 areas, I think we can say fairly convincingly that the United States has world-leading strengths. When we come to tier 2, we basically said this is for countries that have world-leading strengths in several of those 7 categories, but weaknesses in others. And so, for example, China has a very strong digital economy, but we took the view that it was not even yet as strong as that of the United States. We also took the view that China's cybersecurity is very weak and no match really for, or no comparison really with the cybersecurity of some other countries. So countries like the UK, for example, are well ahead of China in cybersecurity. And this was confirmed, in fact, by the ITU's Cybersecurity Index released just this week, which puts China at 33rd in the world. That's 33rd rank in the world in terms of its cyber defenses. So really tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 was about how countries measured up against these 7 categories. To graduate from tier 2 to tier 1 is really means you have to catch up with the United States. You have to have world-leading strengths in all of those 7 categories. To go from tier 3 to tier 2, you have to have very visible world-leading strengths in 2 or 3, perhaps, of those categories. So, for example, we suggest in the report that Japan is the country from the tier 3 most likely to reach tier 2 in a foreseeable future. We don't put India in the same category as Japan in the sense of having that potential in a relatively, sort of a decade or so to reach tier 2. but we could have, because India certainly has that potential. It's a great scientific and technical capability, but there are a whole lot of things around the organization of core cyber intelligence capability, and in a sense the undemonstrated use of offensive cyber operations, as well as fleshing out the digital economy. So India's got a great digital economy, but it doesn't have comprehensive strengths in as many areas of the digital economy as a country like Japan, or even as a country like China. So it's quite a complex set of judgments, and I invite people to have a look in more detail into the report just to see all the nuances that go with that. Thank you.
Sure. Kazim, demonstrable offensive capabilities. Now, we do know about that with vis-a-vis Pakistan, but would India be demonstrating those capabilities even if it did have them? And how much do we have offensive capabilities when it comes to, say, China?
No, I think we definitely have the capabilities when it comes to China. I think over the last couple of years, our emphasis has also been pivoting towards reacting to China. I think that's something which the government of India is focusing on. But I think also, you have the NTRO, which does a lot of technical research around the intelligence as well as cyber warfare and cyber in the cyberspace domain. So there are bodies which are which have the responsibility to undertake this kind of research and deploy offensive capabilities. A lot of that happens, and the need is to be able to continuously grow your capabilities. And I think that's where collaboration, technical collaboration, I feel, with the US and the UK, are sort of like-minded countries which have shared values of democracy. It's critical for India to be able to counter any greater rise in offensive from our adversary across the border. And I think the role of Quad is also very critical here when it comes to defending the cyberspace, and that cannot be undermined. Also, the fact that India is slowly developing the capabilities. The private sector is very strong, as the report by Professor Austin already highlights. And I think when it comes to the government and the strategies, let's hope the cybersecurity strategy which comes out looks at some of these issues, and there is greater level of, I would say, agility when it comes to reacting to some of these situations, also proactively monitoring some of these situations and being able to react before it happens. So I think some of those capabilities have to be demonstrated more so, and I'm sure the country is moving in that direction. But it takes time to develop those capacities. It's not a one-day job. I mean, looking at the US and the UK, they've been at it for decades now. We've been at it over the last decade or so. So obviously, it will take us some more time to be able to improve. But we have the technical know-how. We have the technical understanding. I think that's also demonstrated by the IISS report, that the foundations are there for India to be able to really, sort of advance its offensive capabilities. Now it's up to India, the strategy, the policymakers, the government, the private sector to come and collaborate, and also, how effectively our international diplomacy is. And at this stage, we have a great working relationship with the US. We have a great working relationship with the UK on cybersecurity programs. There's a lot of threat intelligence which is being shared by these countries with India. And now the approach is to sort of go to the next level, right, which will help India reach tier 2. Hopefully in the next report, India would be there or sort of be knocking on the doors. And it takes time, but I think we are working on that path.
Professor Austin, the report also looks at what Kazim was talking about in terms of India or tier 3 countries collaborating with others when their capacity is not as high. You mentioned the Quad. I think in Australia also there is a India-Australia strategic partnership working on cyber as well. But the potential that both the report and Kazim, we all know about India in terms of the base that we have in terms of educated people who, 5 times I think what the US has, and artificial intelligence in India. How does your report see that, or what is your opinion of India in that, Professor Austin?
Well, I think that the foundations of science and technology and education in India are very strong. That's obviously a great characteristic in India's favor. But it really to, in a sense, increase a country's cyber power, you need to have a strategy that's got high levels of investment associated with it. And so many governments in the world have done their homework and produced the cyber strategies where they talk about the importance of strengthening the digital economy. They talk about the importance of education and building the skills base, but then that you don't, in many countries, you don't see the associated investment from the government. As Kazim said, this takes time. You can't do it in a day. And we're talking about sustained investment over decades. And that's why the United States, the United Kingdom are so far ahead in cyber power compared with some other countries, because they've been at it for decades. They haven't had wars or domestic violence on their home territory in a way that countries like China have, for example. So it does take time. It's not a one-day job, but it also takes hard decision making. So education reforms are needed in almost every country if we want to build good cyber skills and a good digital economy. And almost every country in the world is failing that test. So it's very hard for the United States to make the changes it needs to its education reform. China is fumbling around with very modest education reforms. Governments like the UK, Australia are doing little bits here and there. But I think the level of investment that's needed is really not just 10% more than last year or 20% more than last year. It's probably 2 or 3 times what was done last year.
Kazim, both of you mentioned the United Nations ITU, the International Telecommunications Union ranking report, which also came out this week. Now, for a layperson, can you explain what seems like disparity? IISS saying India is in the 3rd tier, but the headline for the ITU UN report would say India has moved up 37 ranks to 10th and China is 33rd. Could you simplify that?
I think there are certain basics of cybersecurity and domain which are critical and which are sort of relevant in both the reports. One is that, are we effectively deploying our potential? And I think there, IISS report is very clear that there's a long way to go, and India is moving in that direction. The UN ITU report is definitely looking at the growth India has done in the last few years, which is also very categorically correct, because if you look at in the last 5 to 7 years, India has moved notches ahead when it comes to cybersecurity, and showing it on the screen. India is number 10 right now, but we still have a long way to go. I would always look at how effective we are in terms of defending our cyberspace, and how effective we are in terms of looking at offensive capabilities with respect to preventing and preempting attacks in the cyberspace. And India's capability has grown a lot in that space. But because our adversary nations are also growing in that space, you cannot stop. So while we are 10th today, we need to keep on building the momentum to make sure that we remain 10th or improve our ranking in the future. Similarly, from a 3-tier to a 2-tier structure, we need to be able to deploy a strategy which is effective for today's times. We need a cybersecurity strategy which is effective for today's times. We need to grow indigenous technologies, right? And I just want to sort of put some emphasis on the fact that right now, we have to be able to deploy or develop, like, you're looking at 5G, Internet of Things, AI, in all these emerging technologies. Where is India standing? Now, in the AI space, you correctly pointed out that, India is the 3rd largest country when it comes to the amount of research papers and the cited research India has done. So definitely there is a lot of potential, but technology-wise, we need to develop more when it comes to deploying these technologies within the use of domestic ecosystems. We need to grow our own encryption standards, and think something around the role of end-to-end encryption cannot be sort of undermined when it comes to defending cyberspace or for our own cybersecurity. And we are seeing that with the Army developing SCI, which is an acronym for the encryption communication device, which is called Secure Application for Internet. You're looking at critical infrastructures. You're looking at critical applications like Arogya Setu, Aadhaar, all are protected by encryption, right? So the point being that we understand these aspects. What we have is we're doing a lot of great things in various places, you have the right technologies being deployed, you have a strategy being developed. Now you need to sort of unify this, bring in a sort of overarching doctrine which effectively deploys and increases our capacity on ground. And once you streamline the process, you will see that hopefully India will move from 3 tier to 2nd tier and hopefully grow its sort of ranking. But it can't be done without investment. I think Professor Austin has already pointed out, you need a lot of investment. We cannot rest on our laurels and assume, okay, this is going to be like this for next year. No, things move very fast, right? And for that, we need to be very agile on our feet for counter espionage strategy, counter offensive strategies, as well as defending our cyberspace.
Unify, overarching, those are a couple of words that you use there, and I think the IISS report also points out the amount of organizations and various legs which are all over. But Professor Austin, in terms of winding up on this discussion, I mean, we've seen players, whether it's in the US or China, using warfare of this kind, if you want to call it that. But how close is the world to seeing this and needing to develop defenses and offensive capabilities in the cyberspace?
Well, I think the phrase that best summarizes the need is that cyberspace has moved to center stage of global security. So once upon a time, cyberspace was about 20, 30 years ago, it was about stopping viruses from getting in your computer. But today, cyberspace has moved to center stage of international security. It underpins the military strategies of the United States, China, and Russia, and some other countries. If a country wants to defend its sovereignty and defend its borders, it has to be able to operate in cyberspace. And as the Chinese government put it recently, or in 2015, in fact, outer space and cyberspace are the new commanding heights of international security competition. And that's where we are, and that's why we need to defend ourselves in cyberspace.
Kazim, if you want to wrap up, I mean, the space, the cyberspace is as important in defending as your land or maritime borders.
Absolutely. I think, and the Indian Army recognizes that, the Indian government recognizes that. And I think moving forward, I think one aspect also is important to recognize is the intersection of privacy and security, and that we need strong privacy laws in India as well when it comes to citizens and people using their mobile phones. A lot of digital awareness has to go when it comes to people securing themselves and taking the right actions to sort of safeguard their own private data. And I think that's also very critical to defend India's sort of cyberspace, because cyberspace is what? It basically constitutes India's internet. And internet is consumed by people who use internet devices, who are chatting with each other, who are making payments, who are transacting online, having discussions, interviews like this. All these systems have to be secure. So it also boils down to people being focused, and there's a lot of digital awareness required, and the government is doing a lot of that already. But it is continuously important, because you see the rise of India's digital prowess, and India is going to be the largest user of internet if it's already not. So there, the scope of Digital India is huge when it comes to raising the awareness of protecting yourself on these devices. The regulations have to be built in. We have to pass a data protection law as well, which protects user privacy. And also we have to have strong laws when it comes to defending cyberspace and a very effective strategy, cybersecurity plan of action.
Kazim Rizvi, I absolutely appreciate your time here on StratNews. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Professor Greg Austin, thank you for giving us time from Singapore to share your views on the IISS report and cyberspace security in general. Thank you for your time again.
Yes, thank you, Amitabh. My pleasure.
Just a reminder to our viewers, do click on that bell icon on YouTube to get notifications for videos like this that we put up. To also subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's important. Those numbers are important to us. And what's more important is also any kind of support that you would like to give for our journalism to continue to grow. You can do that by going on to the link that's provided in the YouTube descriptor. Do also follow our social media handles on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for the latest news and analysis from an Indian perspective. This is a premiere on a Talking Point. We are not live, but it's just a programming note that at 8 p.m. tonight, we continue with our series on the Chinese Communist Party and its 100th year, what that means. Today, editor Surya Gangadharan is in conversation with Professor Rana Mittar, who's a professor at Oxford and teaches both modern and political history of China. You've been watching Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.
As the Chinese Communist Party marks its 100th anniversary, noted China watchers take a look back at what the world's largest political party has achieved and the challenges it faces going forward.
If you go by population statistics, it is still 1 out of every 14 Chinese men and women who are members of the party.
A party that came from 100 years ago. A machine, you might say, that rules 1/4 of humanity.
Everyday lives of all Chinese citizens.
Only on StratNews Global.